Drop in the untold stories of industry leaders, influencers, and insights on future innovation. I'm John Davidson, and this is the DLC Drop Podcast. All right, excited for this episode of the DLC Drop Podcast. I love the opportunities to lean into the skateboarding side of my life, and somebody who I have watched from a distance, especially from a business perspective in skateboarding for a very, very long time, is our guest today, Ryan Clements. Thank you for joining me on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. I mean, you certainly haven't watched me from my skateboarding career, definitely from my business career.
You know, that the setup in the driveway, I think when you have that set up of the dream driveway, I don't think people even question the skills on the board. They assume you're incredibly good at skateboarding.
No, I'm not incredibly good. At this point, skateboarding is just exercise. You know, just keep trying to keep myself young.
Well, at 39 years of age now, I haven't lost a ton of tricks. Like I can still, when the stars align, hit that hip derail with a good amount of tricks. But what I will say is sometimes I have those days where I roll up and the legs just aren't there. And I'm like, okay, this counts as cardio. And if I'm going to be missing tricks the whole time, I'm going to try a new trick. Maybe I can learn something. That
works. Yeah. I got 10 years on you, and it's like your body just, it just doesn't work the same way, you know, and things hurt differently and all that. But for me, man, it just keeps me going. And I feel like I owe it to skateboarding. Like I have to skate. I can't not skate.
Oh yeah. You have to.
What I do.
Question for you that just popped in my mind. What was your favorite trick, like prime of your career?
Oh.
And what is your current favorite trick?
Yeah, well, I was never particularly good at skateboarding, you know?
Yeah.
I had a lot of fun when like reverts and switch tricks became something on transition, like the late 80s, early 90s, like doing like backseat reverts or like switch rock and rolls, or like that was like a trick then, you know?
Yeah.
Now it's like whatevs. But nowadays, man, just the fact that I can still do a pivot to fake or a Smith grind, it's like stoked, you know, just cruising around.
Yeah.
I do every time I skate. I have a mani pad at my house and here at the TF, or they're everywhere. Like whenever I skate, I do 5 manuals, 5 nose manuals before I do anything else. And I want to always be able to do that no matter what.
Yeah, there was a trick a while back. I'm trying to think of what it was. Just kickflip 50/50s on a ledge. And I remember I stopped doing them for a while because I was like, it's not the greatest trick. You know, I want to do other tricks, whatever. And then I lost them and then I couldn't do a kickflip 50/50. And I was like, oh, no. Like, I can't let that out of the bag. I got to bring it back.
That happens, man. And it's like, for me, it's the fear thing. You know, it's like you don't skate. Like you might get busy, go on a trip. Maybe I didn't skate on that particular trip. Go back to my driveway. Driveway's kind of, it doesn't look like it on video and photos. It's a little bit intimidating. You go really fast down the hill if you don't speed check yourself and hit the quarter pipes on the way down. Slope of the grade of the driveway is steeper than it seems. And then some of the ramps are just unforgiving, man, and they're not perfect. And it wasn't designed all as one master plan. It was like, oh, let's build this here and build that there, and it's imperfect, and it's conducive to eating shit on a regular basis.
Love it. Yeah. Well, I think I was thinking back towards what may be our first interaction, and I think possibly our first interaction was when I was 17 years old, and the damn AM was announced that at Volcom headquarters in Costa Mesa, they were going to have the very first event where they were going to have this new series for amateur skateboarders.
Yep.
And I was at that point in my career where I had, I was sponsored by everyone you've never heard of. So I was getting I had a skate shop sponsor, apparel sponsor, those t-shirt companies came up and down all the time. I had shop flow for Globe. So shout out Jay Gatlin, who kept me going for many, many years there. But I remember calling the office, like whatever number was in the magazine or whatever it was back then, trying to get in to get a ticket or to. And I remember talking to probably you on the phone. since there was 3 or 4 of you guys running the place.
It probably was, yeah, and it probably was the Skatepark of Tampa number.
Yeah. So I called, and probably you picked up with the phone, and I'm like, "Hey, man, yeah, this is who I am. I'm trying to get in this contest." And you're like, "Well, appreciate your interest, but we're trying to really make this like the top AMs in the world." And I said, "Well, how do you know I'm not one of them?" And then I showed up. Turned out I wasn't one of them. The DLC Drop podcast is sponsored by Ice Shaker. I've been a huge fan of this brand for the past few years, ever since I met founder Chris Gronkowski. What I love about this product is the brand story, the functionality, and the customization. Ice Shaker is a Shark Tank company invested in by Mark Cuban and Alex Rodriguez, owned by NFL players Rob Gronkowski and Chris Gronkowski. I love using my Ice Shaker anytime I'm driving to the podcast studio, I'm going skateboarding, or I'm at the gym. No matter what I'm doing, it just does a great job of keeping my drinks hot or cold. The customization for Ice Shaker is something that's super unique. You can get any name, just about any logo engraved onto your Ice Shaker and delivered to you within just 3 to 5 business days. Get your own DLC Drop branded Ice Shaker at iceshaker.com/DLC Drop. Save 20% on all Ice Shaker products with the discount code DLC Drop.
It is funny, right? Like back then, how you had to do things. You couldn't just, and nothing was digital. It's fun. I remember that you just brought up memories of, people would fax their Tampa Am and Tampa Pro entries to us on the fax machine, because yeah. Mike Carroll would send it, or Rick Howard, or back then in the 90s.
Yeah. So I remember I rolled up and I'm skating against Ryan Sheckler. Andrew Reynolds is just hanging out watching. Billy Marks won the contest. Wow. And like every AM that I had seen in every magazine I was skating against, and every pro who I watched in every magazine was right there on the sidelines watching all their skaters skate. And it was
crazy how that was then, because there were video parts, there were full-length videos.
Yep.
There was the magazines, but there was no like constant in your face, like with social or internet kind of things, right? And right. So it was a big deal if there was a major contest. So everyone went, because you didn't see people otherwise. And in the crowd, it would be, I remember Tony Hawk used to go to those. He used to just roll up.
Wow.
And we're like, well, Tony Hawk's here. Wow. Yeah, that's how I was too. It was like, it was a big deal. In a parking lot, there were no skate. Think about it. Like now, like there were no skate park. There wasn't even a skate park yet there in Costa Mesa.
No.
Like that was worthy of a contest, at least.
Yeah. Volcom had their indoor setup where people would be in there shredding, and you're like skating next to Jamie Thomas or whatever, just like whatever. And then you go out to the obstacles, the skate course, which was enormous. It was during that time where like people are skating like the ginormous rails, not yet kinked rails, but just huge ones. And they had one rail down a bank that was like, I think Corey Duffel hit it or somebody. Yeah. Nobody else touched that thing. There's like, John, you leave that for the people who skate that. Don't.
It's funny how big everything was, right? I remember a lot of the quarter pipes were like 6 feet tall. The bank to wall was big. Like you would have to push your ass off to be able to hit the bank to wall.
Correct.
Like, just because it was massive.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, the times are different, right? And like we didn't figure out a lot of that stuff yet of like skate park design. It was like, hey, you just need it's pretty basic, man. You just need a quarter pipe, a ledge, a hip. Probably didn't even have a hip. Just had like a 3 foot tall, 8 foot deck pyramid that was just massive.
Yeah, some dude's nollie heel flipping it. I'm trying to catch a kickflip over it and not look like an idiot. What a time to be alive.
Those are cool.
Yeah, so we've both come a long ways from that time. I really respected everything that you and the team did at Skatepark of Tampa, especially, skate parks and skate contests are so looked down upon by skate culture because it's not out in the wild, it's not skating in the streets. And so I want to get into a little bit of that, how you guys were able to make that authentic and accepted. And then your time at the border, you're now representing pro skaters, a number of them who have pro shoe deals. So I'm excited to get into all that with you. Why don't we start where it makes the most sense with your career path? How about landscaping?
No, that's funny. I was just a kid, just a typical kid with a lawnmower when I, in my neighborhood when I was a, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, early teenager, and I was in college, graduated high school, and went to college, and man, it was really slow paced for me, and I just felt like I was in 13th and 14th grade. It just I didn't like it. And did you know
what you wanted to be, or did you have like a goal, or were you just like going so you didn't get kicked out of mom and dad's house, sort of a thing?
I was already out of mom and dad's house. That happened already, right? So I moved out when I turned 18. Lived in a room in the back of a friend's house, and I was working construction at a sheet metal, an air conditioning company that I was in the sheet metal department. So it was really a good experience. I was around all these like hardworking Southern men that like taught me how to work, like how to get shit done, how to get things from point A to point B, how to like hang giant things off of big commercial buildings, and like just use all this different equipment and tools. And I thought that was just how to be really productive in an 8-hour time frame. Like we're going to do this today. That was a cool experience. I was mowing lawns on the side still in college, and going to college to be a teacher. I was going to be a shop teacher.
Yeah.
I was like 19 years old, making more money doing construction and mowing lawns on the side than what the teacher's salary was. And then I was like, and I'm going to be constricted by this job that I have to follow these rules, which I was not really into. And I was like, I quit college and I quit the construction job, and I started the lawn service. I was doing the math. I had a push mower and, just really cheap, non-commercial equipment.
Yeah.
And I was making $200 on Saturday and $200 on Sundays. And this is in 1992.
Yeah.
So I was like,
banking.
Wait, I'm making $400 in 2 days. I can make $1,000 a week at that time was like pretty significant money.
Right.
I was like, I'll make $50,000 a year. And that's why. So I quit my job, quit college, started a lawn service. And that's what I did for 4 years. One of my accounts was Skatepark of Tampa.
Wow.
When
interesting.
Brian Schaefer founded Skatepark of Tampa in 1991. He and I were friends years before from skating together. I was like, let me help you out. I'll mow your lawn. And as a courtesy, like once a year, he'd be like, yeah, pick what you want from the shop. So that's what I would do.
Sick.
He and I were two of our friends out of the group of friends that like had like responsibilities, a business, enough money to go to a restaurant and eat out.
Yeah. So
we became friends, closer friends because of what we had in common and what we were both so young and learning all these things that we had never done before.
Yeah. Similar lifestyles and level of lifestyle at the same age, right?
Yeah. And then Skatepark of Tampa at the time had the indoor street course, and they built that outside metal bowl.
Yeah.
If you remember from a long time ago. And Brian built that bowl, and that's what kept me skating the whole time. I'm like, oh, there's something I like to skate. Skateboarding at the time was like small boards, small wheels. It was a weird time of skateboarding.
Tech on ledges sort of a thing?
What's that?
More tech on ledges, flipping in, flipping out. And
yeah, it was like the beginning of Bo Turner, Scott Conklin. If you remember those guys, like that beginning of Alien and like all that, like it was very, very technical.
Yeah.
And I remember I bought the biggest board they had at Skatepark. Was an Anti-Hero. I remember who's probably a Cardiel. Mm-hmm. Was he on Black Label then still, or was he on Anti-Hero? I can't remember even what year it was, but I got the biggest board they had, and I would skate that bowl, and that kept me skating.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then I was mowing lawns all those years, and it was cool. I learned a ton. I learned so much because I just dove into it, and started an S corp and had payroll and employees and trucks and clients, and had to figure out, this is like computers were new. Like I had a giant giant desktop computer.
Yeah.
Just to figure out how to invoice people, like I didn't even there was no email. I didn't have an email address yet. That's how long ago it was,
That's interesting. And, so how did that merge from, hey, I'm mowing your lawn to I'm your business partner, essentially?
Well, I just was I was like, hey, I think my skill set can help you here. So that was 5 years after he started is when he started Skatepark in Tampa in 93. And then I started working there in 98.
Okay.
So I started working there, and it's the relationship was, I was an employee at Skatepark in Tampa. A few years later, we bought the property, and I became a partner there.
Oh, I see.
And then years after that, we started Spotlight Production. Damn Am was absorbed by Spotlight Production. Spotlight Productions. And with Spotlight Productions was kind of like the beginning of what the border is now, of like consulting and executing events for other groups.
Interesting. I'm curious, when you talk about consulting for groups, probably a lot of them are outside of skateboarding, or some are touching in a way, but maybe they don't have the resources to get what they'd want for an event. What are some of the bigger questions, or what do people typically have wrong about what you consult them on?
It is mostly within skateboarding.
Okay.
That we end up with, but on the outskirts of it, right? Like maybe it's X Games, or maybe it's Dew Tour, or like the Smithsonian. That's a good example of like completely outside. Yep. But it's like inside is still like Red Bull, Vans, even Nike or Woodward, or like whatever we're dealing with. And there's a connection to skateboarding still.
Sure.
But it's like they usually have an initiative in some capacity that they're attempting to execute, and then we can help them get, like, we want our contest to look like this, all those other contests look like that, can you make a contest look like this? And it's like yeah, we can do that. Like you want it to be the strictest rule following, like live scoring, and everything is absolutely perfect on all these rules. Yes, we got you. Like we have all the capabilities to do everything just like an Olympic contest. We actually did the year before, a few months before the Olympics in 2021, we did a private contest for all the Red Bull skaters globally.
Oh, no way.
And we did a mock Olympics for them.
Sick.
That we created. Yeah.
Who skated in that?
Well, it wasn't public. So it was every Red Bull rider.
Oh, wow.
Was going to the Olympics. Every Red Bull skater that was going to the Olympics was there.
Okay.
So, yeah. It was really, man, that was so fun, because you're doing this contest, but it was fake, but it was real.
Yeah.
And because they're getting scored and judged. And then if something happened that was interesting, you could stop it in the middle of the contest, gather everyone around, and explain to them, here's what happened, here's your strategy in this situation, here's what you should do. It was really fun.
Well, that's been something really interesting with Street League, which is probably the first contest that really requires a lot of strategy beyond just, hey, am I on today, or do I have the tricks that the judges are responding to, or I'm just better than everybody else? But it's interesting because you'll see skaters that, best in the world, but, struggle at the end of this contest because either they're not trying the right trick, or they aren't fully comprehending, like, what's a good example? I got one line, I only have one score in my line, right? And so I need 3 best tricks, and so let me not go like full ham on this first try to make sure I get a score, and then I can build on that. And you see some people do that very well. Some people are more just pure street skaters. So it sounds like in that situation, you're consulting the pros themselves pre-Olympics to say, hey, really think about this while you're in this process.
Yeah, have them fully understand the format, where they go through it, not just read it and hear about it. And then my colleague George just left the office like 2 hours ago to fly to Rio, where they're having the Street League Championships this weekend, to work with Felipe Gustavo, who is one of the most strategic and put together dudes. But he likes having George in his corner when that time comes to be like, what do I need to do right now?
Interesting.
And then George is like really good at, like, well, first of all, he knows every trick Felipe can do and the consistency of those tricks, on what obstacle he can do it on, knows a good idea what he thinks the judges will score those tricks, so he can advise accordingly to, like, you're not trying to do your hardest trick at the time you don't need to do it.
Well, for Felipe Gustavo, nollie flip crook, I think is a warm up. So what is your hard?
The switch flip back tail shoves. is on the outledge is the, you just got to tell him when to do what. And Felipe is so on point. It's funny, but he likes having George there. He's like, can you come to it?
Super interesting.
Better to have you there. Super cool.
Were you at Skatepark of Tampa when Felipe Gustavo, maybe the greatest discovery story ever, won that Tampa Am?
Not only that, but Rob Marinick, my business partner now, and I were the first people he talked to upon getting out of the cab and walking into the shop and not knowing anybody and not being able to speak English. We had to get over the microphone. It was like, does anyone here speak Portuguese so we can talk to this kid?
Oh, yeah. So let's set this up because I think this is literally one of the greatest discovery stories of all time. For the non-skateboarding audience on here, Felipe Gustavo is an amazing skateboarder, skates for Plan B Skateboards. He's been pro for, 10, 12 years. He skates for Adidas, skates for Red Bull, and many years ago, and then I'll let you take it from here, Ryan, he and his father took a flight from Brazil with the hope to get on the course. Do I have that right?
Exactly. He won a trip to Tampa for a contest he won in Brazil, and the people that gave him the trip to Tampa never coordinated with us that he could get in the contest.
Oh my gosh.
So he shows up and he's like, I won a trip here. Once we got a translator.
Right. Not even in English, in Portuguese. He's like trying to explain I'm supposed to be in this contest.
And I'm like, you're not in this contest. We never heard of you. We don't know who these people are. The contest is full.
And also for our non-skaters, Tampa Am is the most desired contest for anyone who's not pro to get in there because it's your opportunity to be seen, and there are a limited amount of spots, and maybe some gatekeeping, right? To be fair, hey, you cannot roll up to Tampa Am and just skate that contest. You have to know people. You have to be a top guy. They learned their lesson with Damn Am with me. I think they're like, kids are calling in and saying they're really good, and then they can't land any tricks. Just to build on where you're going here is to get in this contest is like getting to the hottest VIP club of all time and just showing up and say, I'm supposed to be inside. And it's like, no, you're not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't get in, you can't even get in the door nowadays,
Yeah.
And so back then, if you just showed up and you weren't already entered in the contest, it was essentially impossible. Unless for some weird reason, someone could pull a string with you or the right industry person was there to be like, yes, this guy's on my flow team from here. We believe in him. We think he's going to be this. And that happened once in a while. But with someone that didn't speak English, it was like, you're like, and no one knew him. He didn't know anybody.
Wow.
It would be really difficult. So I don't remember what happened, but we made him wait that one day. But then
was there a ledge on the ground? You just starts doing nollie flip nose slides, and you're like, maybe.
Yeah, and maybe it happened where he snuck out on the course and we saw him or whatever it was, but we ended up getting him in the contest.
Yeah,
and he won.
He won,
which is insane to do. It's the best skaters in the world that aren't pro, and he beat them all, and no one ever had heard of him before.
Yeah, and the thing too there on that is skateboarding is so subjective that it's not that the judges aren't doing a great job or scoring accurately, but there's so much, is this trick better than that trick? And so typically skaters who are well known and beloved by the industry are naturally getting a little extra love versus this kid who shows up, nobody's ever seen him before, he doesn't speak English, and so that can just tell you how much he deserved to win above and beyond, taking the crown in that moment and never look back.
Yeah, if you're turning heads and no one's ever seen you before, that's really something. You're right, because he's skating against kids that are already scheduled to be pro. They're going to turn pro, in months or short time later. It's already and they're all well known. And you're right. I would say that there's definitely the judging would not be considered biased in any way. I want to clarify that for those guys, but you're going to notice that's the guy that just had that ad with 0, or that's the guy that is the new Spitfire dude that is coming up, So yeah. And when someone comes up like Felipe with a bunch of sponsors you never heard of, all Brazilian sponsors,
right?
Just some random kid that doesn't speak English. He's there with his dad. And you probably heard the rest of the stories. His dad, to afford the entire trip, his dad sold the family car.
Yeah.
Like it's a crazy story. And it's the ultimate skateboarding turning pro story and American dream story, because Felipe is now a U.S. citizen. So,
right. Wow.
You know, yeah, he is. And also, I can't say enough nice things about Felipe. The reason that Felipe made it is because of his perseverance, his hard work, and his consistency of over and over. He's just going to show up and do his job, and he is the best, hardest working, and sweetest kid. We still work with him. He was one of our first clients when we started managing skaters. Incredible.
Well, that's a perfect step into, this next part of your journey here, which is part of what you do is you just so happen to represent some of the greatest skateboarders in the world as in an agent type of a role. Do I have that right?
It is. It is. It's traditional sports agent type role. It started a little different though. That side of our business, I started when I was still at Skatepark at Tampa. My co-founder with that side of the business is called Excel Management. My co-founder of that's Heath Brinkley. Heath is the president of skateboarding at Primitive.
Yes. Primitive is awesome. Yeah, we had Robert Brink on the podcast, and he was working with Primitive at the beginning. And what Heath and Primitive have done is incredible. They've touched some of the esports fandom with their anime collabs and stuff like that. So huge fan of what they're doing.
Yeah, they're a massive, for in skateboarding terms, massive company, hugely influential. Heath has done like so many things in his career, right? He was like one of the first team managers of Action Footwear, and then he was at DC. He's been at Etnies. He's done so much, and he would come to Skatepark of Tampa every year, and he ended up becoming P-Rod's personal brand manager.
Right.
So he was Paul's personal brand manager. He and I were just friends he would bring the team, he would bring Paul, whatever company he was working for at the time, and we're friends. And he goes, "Hey man, we became buddies." He's like, "You're really good at like small business. You should manage, like from a business perspective, pros, because they don't have anyone to do it." And he was explaining to me how Paul had a company, a CPA or a firm that collected his checks, paid his bills, made sure his payroll was getting done with his corporation, got him loans, did anything you needed from a small business perspective.
Yeah.
And Heath put me in touch with Paul. I already kind of knew Paul, him from just contests and stuff. Paul hit me up. He's like, "Hey, I heard you can do this." And he explained to me like what the company did exactly. And I'm like, I can totally do that. Well, so Paul was our first.
What's interesting about Paul too is he was one of the first amateur skateboarders that was really making a significant amount of money before he turned pro, right? Before it was, hey, you're not getting paid. Maybe you're getting per diem or whatever, or you're able to sell the extra skateboards that you're getting for free as an AM. But he was someone, he had the Benz, right? And because of his father's entertainment background, his father's the comedian Paul Rodriguez, had kind of an understanding of this. And what's funny, and another funny coincidence, I grew up with Paul's cousins, Sam and George Rodriguez.
Wow.
They're from Orange Cove, California, teeny tiny town. I'm from Reedley, California, and Orange Cove actually has one of the best skate parks around, because I think because Paul was somehow involved in it getting done out there. So every once in a while, Paul would come to town, and this was like DNA Skateboards days.
Oh, wow. Going back.
Yeah, one time I was skating their driveway, and we, go in, just hanging out, watching skate videos, and Paul calls Sam and George. And this was when he was between City Stars and Girl. And he called, and there's this there's this big set of stairs. I think he does frontside flip and switch frontside flip, and that might have even been his first Girl ad. But he calls Sam and George, he's on speakerphone, he's like, "Dude, I skated with Costin today and Mike Carroll, and it was the sickest thing. I frontside flip and switch frontside flip these stairs and blah, blah." And it's just like, I'm sitting there like witnessing a moment. And then
that's cool.
Sure enough. So yeah, a lot of respect for what he's done, and a little insight into, inside peek into the start of his career.
Yeah. Paul is, he's a unique person. He's the guy that lights the room up. He's like the mayor,
Yep.
And Paul's going to do anything he wants with his entire life, because he's that special dude. So that was like 12 years ago that Paul hit me up. Maybe it was a little longer at this point, and we still work with Paul in that capacity.
Cool.
We're still his business managers, and we watched this whole thing of like leaving Plan B, not know what he's going to do. Primitive starting. That was a lot of that was Heath. Well, it was all Heath behind the scenes going. Primitive needs primitive skateboarding.
Yeah,
that was Heath's brainchild. So we start managing Paul's, essentially money, collecting checks, paying bills, handling all that kind of stuff. And then our next client was Fred Gall, and he was in trouble with
That's the other end of the skateboarding spectrum from transition and different brand, Fred Gall versus P-Rod for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, I say this publicly because Fred talked about it publicly too. It was an interesting issue with the IRS, and so we jumped in and started helping them, because when you don't pay your taxes, you get levied. They go into your bank account. They freeze everything. They'll take your money. So we got that to stop and worked with the IRS, and it was just one of those things where we just started getting a reputation of like, hey, these guys solved my problem.
Right.
And skateboarding's small and tight. These guys are all friends, and I think our next client might have been Stefan, and it kind of grew from there.
Wow.
Then what ended up happening was so Paul had a separate agent, and a lot of these guys had, well, not a lot, the Tip Top guys had agents. Like
right. Sheckler and
Costin, like they have agents, and no one was doing what we're doing within skateboarding. And then I had spent all those years at Skatepark at Tampa. We just really fast forwarded through the Skatepark at Tampa 15 years. But I had the experience of like negotiating with, everyone from Duff's, DVS, Nike, Red Bull, all the sponsors along the way, whether it be, the hard goods, all the hard goods companies, had relationships with everybody. So I had visibility into contracts and what was getting done, how much was getting paid, and then being friends with pros, being friends with people and just hearing things, and then starting doing the business management. I started getting it as a fact, like, oh, this is what Nike's paying this person, or that's what Red Bull's paying that person. We started having, at this time, maybe we have 8, 9, 10 clients. So I had a good visibility of guys from up at the top down to a little bit lower. And I'm like, okay. And so then someone hit me up. I can't remember who it was, but it was like, hey, would you look at this Red Bull contract? Sure. Oh, you know what? I just thought of who it was. So we were doing the business management for Austin Gillette, who we still do. He was a little kid. He's like 18 or 19 at the time, probably, And he was on Quicksilver. And the Quicksilver, this is when Quicksilver had a skateboarding team, and then they just dropped everybody, if you recall this.
Yes.
All at once. Everyone from, I think it was like Tim O'Connor might have been still on at the time, and like
was Reese Forbes on there?
What's that?
Was Reese Forbes on there?
Reese was on there. He might have been off at that point, but Justin Brock, a lot of guys were on, and Austin was one of them. And he sent me his contract. And in the contract, there was a clause that permitted the brand to fire you within 30 days notice for any reason whatsoever. And I'm like,
yikes.
Didn't make sense to me. And then Austin was like, is there anything we can do? And then I was like, no, because you signed it. And that's that. They're cutting the program. But that was the trigger of like, hey, these guys that aren't on the Paul level or Sheckler level, they need help too. And you can help them.
Yeah.
And make them money, make them more money. Because what it takes, someone in my role, right? It's like you have a skateboarder who's got 3 or 4 different hard goods sponsors. Maybe if they're on Red Bull or Monster, they have a headwear situation, they have an apparel, they have footwear. If you take all of those separate deals and you bring them all up to the tip top that they can be for that skater, you can significantly increase their overall income.
Right. And you're getting paid by 6 different people. So even if it's a couple grand and then it's 5 grand, 7, 10, etc., then that's times 6. Obviously they have ranges, but that money can add up real quick once it starts to grow.
Yeah. And the other thing you can do is make the companies work together, right? Let's say, for example, someone gets a big incentive from their apparel company if they have a back page ad, but then you get them on the new company that is running the back page ads and you say, hey, can you give them this as part of the deal? Yeah, sure. We'd love to give them an ad. And so you're like, hey, make sure you wear that logo, and then you get a nice bonus for that. So there's all these different ways to work it to elevate somebody.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and you kind of work in the system there, right? Because you're like, hey, you get your photo incentive plus plus the ad. One thing that I think has been so interesting in skateboarding sponsorship is how companies who are not apparel companies officially are actually apparel companies. I think probably nobody has done it better than Diamond. And then Grizzly Grip, it's the same, the coaching tree, if you will, right? You got Tori coming up after Nikki Diamonds, but it's super interesting how, for our audience who aren't skating, of course, Diamond Supply Co., which is the bolts that hold your trucks onto your board, the hardware. But Nick was friends with all the homies at EMB in San Francisco, which was the mecca of skateboarding in the 90s. And so everybody was sponsored by Diamond, right? Like if you were doing anything right, you were sponsored by Diamond, and then grew this apparel. Everybody had that Diamond shirt, that one logo, that cursive script.
Yes.
And then you have Tori Pudwell kind of took it to the next level, I want to say, with Grizzly Grip, where he's, a grip tape company, and my preferred grip tape, by the way. So if Tori's listening,
nice.
If you want to send me a sheet or two, I'll take it. But, full-blown apparel lines. And one thing that's interesting is Brandon Biebel had an experience with Maddox and Diamond years ago. And he had a day in the life. And Maddox was his apparel sponsor. He wore a Diamond shirt because Diamond is one of his other sponsors. But he's kind of feeling Diamond a little more at the time, from what I understand. And so he actually got dropped by Maddox because he was wearing the wrong t-shirt. And that's an example of when those companies the sponsors are probably not working together, and really interesting dynamic with having multiple sponsors that you have to support.
Yeah, that's part of our jobs, right? It's like to make sure that, like, hey, if he's doing this thing with Diamond, is it cool that he wears this shirt that particular day? And I'll give you an example of what you're talking about there. Mark Gonzalez, as you probably know, is on Adidas apparel.
Right.
He's also on Supreme. So getting in there and making sure that works. And you may notice that Ashad is on Nike apparel, but sometimes you see him walking in a runway or wearing some high fashion, and you just have to make sure that all works. And hey, is Nike cool with this? And are these brands cool with that? Does this bring everybody up? And if you can be a lot of time, you're just in agreement that, like, hey, we're all benefiting from this situation. Ashad wearing some fat, doing a high fashion campaign it brings more attention to him. And
they're not skateboarders are not going to buy those shoes rather than his new signature promo that came out a few months ago. And
often he can be in his shoes, the shoes he's wearing. He can be in his shoes. So that's the whole goal anyways, to sell more Ashad footwear.
Exactly. That's really incredibly interesting. Why don't you list off for us some of those other clients of yours, and especially those that have signature shoes, because it's pretty impressive what's happening with clients there.
I'll look them up, make it easier. And the thing that ended up happening was that we were doing these kind of smaller deals, and then we started picking up and representing skaters that were not yet fully under contract. So that's how we ended up like managing like a Jamie Foy or Nora, who we still manage Jamie and Nora to this day. Mark Gonzalez is obviously it's kind of crazy to manage Mark. He's the greatest of all time. He invented what we do.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm just as a kid, just a Mark fan or whatever. And just like anyone else that's been skating forever, but I didn't know Mark until 10 years ago, when I really started working with him. And it was interesting, all those years in skateboarding, he never had consistent representation, never had someone on his side always going, this is what you need to be doing, and this is how it works, and if you do this, I can do that. And we've had a great relationship.
Well, and he's such a creative genius as well, that it's very uncommon that, hey, you're the best in this world at this one thing, and then you also are an expert in business or have the time to do all these different business things. And I think one thing that's interesting too with Mark Gonzalez is he's got that mystery about him. Like you don't know, maybe you know where Mark Gonzalez is, but nobody else seems to, and he's just going to pop up somewhere maybe at the Supreme store in New York, or maybe he's going to be randomly in Paris, France, or you're going to see him on a schoolyard still skating at like an incredibly high level too, which is, I don't know.
He's 53. He's still ripping.
Jeez.
And he's just that dude that he doesn't have to play the game like everyone else with like social media and this many posts per month and all that stuff. He's just on a different level where he just doesn't have to do that.
Right.
Mark, Nora, Jamie, Ashad, Felipe. Those are like a lot our clients that we that I end up working on a lot. We've done with so many people over the years. We started managing like Brighton Zoyner. When she was before she had. I don't think she had any paying contracts at the time, and then she ended up going on to win like 3 X Games in a row, Vans Park Series, having colorways, getting on Red Bull, like these really like she ends up having these runs, and we would pick kids like Alex Sorgente. We would pick Sorge out because I knew him from Florida. I knew how good he was, and I was like, man, if you do this and this, I could probably get you on this company and we can make this happen. So he had like a really good run of like winning contests too. Because I would see like working on this ground level, you would see all these things happen. You could put the pieces together. And that just led to like, hey, I heard you did this for Sorge. Would you do it for me? And then we started just getting business that way. And it led to these higher earning or maybe higher profile pros, and then you have someone like Nora. I love talking about this because Nora hit me up and I knew who she was. I thought she was cool. I thought she was funny. I thought she ripped. And she's like, hey, I think I need your help. And I'm like, I would love to, but I don't think I can help you. I don't think there's any brands interested in doing anything seriously with a female.
Oh,
and
wow.
She was like, she goes, I think Adidas wants to. You should hit him up.
When was really? This roughly, like years wise?
8 years ago.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So in 2000, what does that make it? I don't know. I'm terrible at that.
Well, the last 4, maybe 5 years, just female skateboarding has just rose so rapidly. I remember, growing up, you basically have dudes at the skate park. Maybe there's someone's girlfriend showed up or something like that, right? But now, I mean, literally every time I go to the skate park, there are girls there and they're skating because they are skateboarders because they just love to do it too. And it is super cool. And I think Nora is one of those people who have just shown young girls like, hey, we can do this too. We can thrive. And we can even have our own signature too for a company like Adidas.
Yeah, that was a long play right there, right? And it's like Adidas knew the value. They understood. They knew they needed to do something with. They had this opportunity with a woman, and it was interesting, right? Because like it was like a starter contract. It was like, hey, let's do 2 years and see what happens. Like, how's this going to play out? What are we going to do? And of course, Nora's skill set is like, of course, she's good at skateboarding. That's like it, right? But then her personality. It's like, oh, we can do more with this. Oh, she's so cool. We love her on trips. And it just rolled into this like Nora is a major player at Adidas.
Yeah. And, that brings me to my next point, which I think is super interesting. It's really the value that you're bringing in this space is guidance and is so needed, proper guidance from the perspective of a skateboarder, but also helping to, identifying the nuances of what makes a skater special, who's going to be that special one. And the reason why I think that's so needed in this space is you have everybody's good now. I can't believe how good every single skateboarder is now. Like I always say,
every skate park, everywhere you go, every skate park you go to, every town, everywhere around the world, everyone rips.
Everyone rips. So because of this dynamic that everybody's just so good now, you don't have enough companies to support everybody that just based on a pure skill level could be pro, right? So then what are those other things, Ryan, that come into play where you look at someone like Nora we talked about, or maybe it's Jamie, maybe it's Ashad, is wait a minute, you can be a brand, you can do something special, and then what are that guidance you're talking about with Sorge, like, don't do that trick, do this trick. Very nuanced.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'll touch on the Sorge thing first, right? I could see his talent, like he's so good at skateboarding. He's powerful and he's consistent, but he didn't know exactly, I'm like, I know what the judges are looking for. And I know like what's considered corny or not corny. So I would just explain to him like, hey man, like even as simple as like, don't wear this today, wear this. Because then no one's going to talk about what you're wearing. They're going to just look at your skateboarding. Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing would be like, hey, this trick is not desirable. And he's like, but isn't that harder than this? I'm like, it is, but it just doesn't look cool. And so if we're trying to look cool today and win this contest, don't do it and do this instead. And he's like, okay. And he was a good listener, right? And he's just like, all right, even though we would like kind of banter back and forth, but he's like, you're telling me not to wear this? Like you're wearing shorts. And I'm like, I'm 45 years old and no one's trying to make products like surrounding me. I'm like, I'm trying to like make you look cool. Like, and he was such a great person because he's so good. He could win the contest. So just a little bit of guidance at that point of like, hey, this is like something that will get you to this next level. He listened and it absolutely worked. When it comes to like, ask the other part of your question again. Sorry, I got.
Yeah, it's simply that there's so much talent, too much talent for companies to support. That guidance that is needed. Yeah.
Yeah. So that has to go with like that. There's like a mixture there, right? So you have like we're looking for skaters obviously that are good. But then at the same time, we just started calling it magic, that possess the magic, right? And they have this thing about them that's special. Nora has that. It's the allure of like, I want to be around Nora. Nora makes me happy and smile. And she has that. Yeah. Mark Gonzalez obviously has the magic because he's the greatest of all time. Shad has that magic, but his is different than Jamie Foy's. And if you take skaters that we don't manage, there's tons of them, man. There's like, that have that magic, like a Sean Malto's magic. Is like different than like a Louis Lopez's magic, different than a Tyshawn's magic. And it's they all have that thing that is like, these dudes are not just what Tyshawn can do over a garbage can. Like
switch.
Not just that. Like that alone is like amazing. But then there's this thing about him. I don't know if it's like his ego, his like, I don't care what you think. I'm going to tell you what I think. And like, that's something special about that. That it's just like, he doesn't give a shit, and there's an allure there. So they're like, damn, I'm interested in that kid. Well, he's got something to say. He's got an opinion.
And also, too, he has a different opportunity than someone like a Sean Malto or someone like a Nora, right? Because his brand needs to be built differently with different companies who support that, who make that happen, which actually Nora and Tyshawn, now that you say it, they both have pro shoes for Adidas. Right? So you've got two people who have signature shoes for the same company, but their brands are worlds apart, would you say?
They are, but their brands are both. They absolutely are, right? Because Tyshawn is like as New York in streets as you can get, right? And but he speaks to a certain group of people, but it spreads farther, right? Because I'm the farthest thing from that. I'm a guy that works in skateboarding that was a contest skater when I was a kid. It's like, you know what I mean? But I'm like, damn, that's so sick the way he does what he does. Like, it's so amazing. And with Nora, it's just a different kind of magic. She's got that special thing because Nora rips, like she's super good, but then she's got that thing about like, man, Tyshawn doesn't make me laugh. Nora makes me laugh.
Yeah. Interesting.
Where I'm like, Tyshawn makes you feel cool. Like, man, that dude's cool. What he's doing is cool. Everything he touches cool. Nora's like cool, and she's funny, and she's not super serious, and she makes skateboarding fun, and she makes you feel like you can be part of the crew. Yeah. Tyshawn's crew is kind of like super cool, and like I'm not part of Tyshawn's crew. I'm part of Nora's crew because I'm like, oh, we're just having fun,
Yeah. Another thing that I think is important. This is something that I'm not saying I have the magic. But something that I experienced that helped me have more sponsors for a longer period of time than just my talent on the board was understanding why I was sponsored. And it wasn't because I was cool. That was just part of it. Now, I knew, like, I backed all my sponsors so hard, And still today, I'm just a natural brain ambassador, having, done it since I was 14. But I knew that a sponsor either gave me free stuff or paid me because they would make more money than if they did not, or if they did that with somebody else. And I had an eye-opening moment with Globe Shoes, with Jay, who used to hook me up for like 7 years. It actually is more of a testament that I couldn't make the jump to actual flow. But at one point, Jay dropped everybody from, his budget, all the people who's flowing shoes, except me. And I wasn't the best skater of all the guys he hooked up by any stretch of the imagination. He said, John, some people just think they're cool and they deserve shoes. And that's not how sponsorship works.
Yes. Work, like, how easy are you to work with? Mm-hmm. How accommodating can you be? Are you not a dick? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
People real quick become super entitled when they get to a certain spot. And if you can keep that humility, maintain humility and be like, man, I'm lucky to be here. Mm-hmm. Then you can go a lot further. Yeah. And check the ego, which is hard for all of us. And it's hard for me. You just got to check it at the door and, I just work here, man. And I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, as we're getting close to the end here. One question I would have for you is, if I'm a skater and I'm listening to this and I'm trying to make it, what are some tips that you could give me, maybe the younger John Davidson who is pushing the limits? What would you say I should do to have the best chance to be successful as a professional skateboarder?
Yeah. I would say that the number one thing, obviously across the board, as we discussed, is being good. That you're going to have to work on your skill set first, right? Yeah. I think that probably the second most important thing is look like you're having a fun time on your skateboard, and that other people have fun and smile by watching you skate. I think that is going to be huge, because that is what sponsors are looking for. You just need someone that, ultimately they're trying to sell product with you in it,
commands the crowd, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And you just make it look fun, make it look like we're having a good time. And yeah, behind the scenes, business is serious, and we're all under contract, and we have, non-competes and NDAs and all that stuff that we can't do.
Sure.
But like, ultimately we're supposed to be having fun. And I would say do that. And beyond that, it's like, your unique personality should shine. You should be an individual. And you should be, all the creativity and all that sort of stuff that goes along with being a professional skateboarder, without faking it, without trying too hard. You can always tell when someone's trying a little too hard,
Right.
Show, and then all the other things, show up with a smile, be there for your demos and your signings, all that stuff. And never be the one that's in the van when you're coming up, and never be a pain in the ass, man. If you're just like, you just go with the flow. Like, everyone's going to Whole Foods, you'll find something, man. You don't have to go to Chick-fil-A. And then when you're Jamie Foy, you can call the shots like, we're going to Chick-fil-A. But that's
then everybody else has to be okay with Chick-fil-A.
Yes, at that point, right? Because there's going to be a time, like, you ascend to this level that you get to call the shots. But when you're just like coming up, man, you just go with the flow, keep your head down, skate. You know what I tell a lot of skaters coming up? I'm like, skate, skate, skate. Don't worry about the rest. Just, it will all work itself out. We managed that little girl, Ruby Lily. She's 15 years old.
Yeah.
She's super good at transition. And I'm just like, skate, skate, skate. Take your Smith grinds, and instead of going 4 blocks, go 10. Take your nose grinds, instead of going 3 blocks, go 7. I'm like, there's no women that are going Mach 10 and doing a 15-foot 5.0. Do that. Like, you ever see how Grant Taylor can get to the finals doing 50-50s and 5.0s? Because they're that much better than the next person, than anyone's actually.
Yeah.
So he's taking the basic shit and doing it better than anyone's ever done it.
Right.
And taking it to the next level. So it's not, you don't need to invent tricks. It doesn't have to, because a lot of times the level of difficulty in tricks right now, but it's not graceful. It's not pretty to watch.
Right. Style matters.
Style matters. So do it, there's certain guys that can do that tricks like that, like a Shane O'Neill can do those tricks that are that hard and make them look good.
Right.
Some guys can't. It's just a struggle for them to land on the board.
No one wants to see flipping in, flipping out, and it looks like you're trying too hard. It's just not appeasing to the. It's art, right? It's what looks good.
aesthetically pleasing is part of it, right? Like, look at Tyshawn. I can keep saying him, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look at Tyshawn. He just looks cool, man. It's aesthetically pleasing. It's a work of art when you see it.
Right.
And then you can look at skaters and know, like, and even the way you're, and you know, of course, you get down to the way someone dresses. It's
right.
important, man. It's like, look at how you look. Do I want to look at like someone that's stylish and has good taste and they look cool, or are you just looking at someone that just doesn't care or have you said it, it's art. So that art's supposed to be appealing.
I remember a thing I noticed. I used to skate with the Think Skateboards team at demos a lot because Jesse Paez was skating for the same shop that I did. And so they would come, and he lived in the area, so they would come do demos together. So I remember Colt Cannon when he was on Think and those guys. And what I noticed about these pro skaters I looked up to that I tried to replicate myself, first thing I noticed was everything was new that they were skating. You know, it's like, oh, that's a brand new board. You know, your wheels are white, not yellow. But the other thing I noticed, I was like, it's one thing if someone's ripping. It's something if someone's ripping in a fresh pair of new shoes that are white or red. And so I would just get white and red shoes and skate them, you know, as new as I possibly can because it was the aesthetics.
Look good, feel good, man. It's true.
That's
it's
right.
Like, I believe in all that, you know, and it's like, it's up here. Like you start with that mentality of like, yeah, I'm going to do this. You have to believe in that first, you know? And yeah, it's a conscious decision, man. It's like, you know, whether their hair is a certain way or not a certain way, or like they wear their shirts one way or their pants are too tight or too baggy, or like all that stuff is like the way the shoes are tied and like, just what do they look like? Do they look fresh and dope or like, and there's that other side of it. It's like, I mean, pick a skater, Andrew Reynolds. He doesn't look fresh and dope. He just looks awesome.
Yeah.
Like he always has looked good.
He looks like Andrew Reynolds. Yeah. He's someone who's differentiating himself by like setting that trend rather than wearing what everybody else says is dope.
Yes. Yeah.
And then that becomes dope.
Feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Ryan, I feel like I could talk to you for a million years about all of the other aspects of skateboarding. I think we got about halfway through what we would love to talk about. Before I let you go, what are some of the ways that people can get in touch with you and follow you in the ways that you'd like them to? Yeah,
for sure. Ryan@theborder.com. That is the best way to get a hold of me. You can hit me on Instagram too, on DM @RTClem. And I'm way better at email though. If I get my phone number out, I wouldn't even reply to you anyway. So you got to email me. Then we set up calls. Yeah.
Perfect.
It's tough. Phone calls are hard, man, because everything I do is like super scheduled. And I'm sure you're the same way. It's like, I can't even, I've been getting texted while we're talking, like, hey, do you have a minute? Hey, do you have a minute? I'm like, not really.
I'm on the DLC Drop podcast. I'm busy.
Exactly. But yeah, it's funny you said, because like everything's like scheduled, and it's like, I do have 30 minutes now because this got done sooner than I thought it would. And I'm skating at 5, then I have to call at 6, and it's just how it goes, man. That's life.
Yeah, that's how you build a business. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for joining me today. I love opportunities to talk skating, especially with somebody who has the resume that you have and has, really served the community for so many years. So thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me today on the DLC Drop podcast.
Thanks, John.
Thank you for listening to the DLC Drop podcast. This podcast is part of the Esports Future I Podcast Network and produced by Innovation Media Enterprises. Make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast channel and leave us a review.